Ayan, good morning. My name is Joseph. I'm the training manager of PMC Business Systems Inc. I welcome everyone to our online training session called Let's Learn Together. And we are deeply honored to today to have Mr. Francis Jim Toscano. Sir Jim is a grade school edtech coordinator at Xavier School, and he is also a digital learning specialist, consultant, and an Apple professional learning specialist. Um, Also, he is a global teacher awardee and an Apple distinguished educator. And of course, we've been working together with Sir Jim for quite a long time, and he's also a good friend of ours. So, without further ado, let me pass the audio to our expert, Mr. Jim Toscano. Sir Jim?
Hi everyone. Can you guys hear me? Can you do a
Yep.
thumbs up? All right. So good morning everyone. So what I'm going to do today is I'm gonna be sharing about learner agency and interaction. Right now I've been doing a lot of work about online distance learning. So let's start. I'm just gonna share my screen so I could share my slides with you. Can you guys see it? All right. So I'll just start. So thank you for the kind introduction, Joseph. Um, right now, I'm just gonna quickly plug in also. I'm also a podcaster, and I'm on my season 5 right now. I recently launched a very relevant and timely series. It's called Global Voices, Pondering Over Education in the COVID-19 Pandemic, where I connect with a lot of leading educators around the world to really think about or reflect on how the pandemic has been affecting the education in general. So you can listen to my podcast. It's Empower Ed Podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can also visit some of my works right now on online distance learning at my website, francisjimtoscano.com. Quickly also, I have a co-written earlier last month when the pandemic was starting a report to UNESCO and Education International. It's called Thinking About Pedagogy in an Unfolding Pandemic. It's a free resource online that guides policymakers and decision makers. Right now, I am waiting for the publication of Embracing Online Distance Learning, so a primer on and guide to establishing an online distance learning program in schools. So these are all available for free, and I hope you guys could take a look at them. Thinking about pedagogy is available online. Embracing online distance learning is being edited for final digital distribution, maybe around this week or end of the week. Everything's free. All in the name of helping a lot of educators right now with online or distance learning. So let's start. This is my hang up as of the moment, and I just want to be clear on this. It's online learning versus online distance learning. There's a major difference between the two. Right now, we often use online learning, and online learning is practically a very different approach to digital integration in education as compared to online distance learning. What's the major difference? What's the only similarity that they have? They use online tools, right? They use online tools. Aside from that, everything is different. Online learning is basically using technology in the classroom, whether you are in the classroom or outside the classroom. One to one iPad in the classroom, when you access online tools, that's online learning. What's the basic mindset there? The teacher is in front of me. Whether I'm looking at him or at her, where I'm still in the classroom, I'm working on it. But online distance learning is actually giving us the most important realization that we should have right now. Teacher and student are at a distance. I think what's happening right now is people go to default online learning. Like for example, There are a lot of higher education institution right now that were not ready for the transition. So what did they do? They brought their lectures, they brought their discussion, they brought their PowerPoints online and lectured online. That's classic online learning. That's an online class. But for online distance learning, teacher considers that a lot of students might not be able to go online together, right? There's a lot of problems about bandwidth and everything. Online distance learning assumes that there is a physical gap between the teachers. That's the major reality. And a lot of teachers, school leaders right now know that reality, but they do not design instruction around that reality or anchor themselves on that reality. So, therefore, my point is online distance learning should be the first thing that we have in mind, especially at this time of the pandemic. Recognize that teachers and students are in different locations. That means there's a big gap. Three kinds of gap right now. Number one is physical gap. Okay. Second, psychological gap. Third is pedagogical gap. If you look at this one, physical gap is something that we cannot do anything about, right? Psychological gap is a very different um, it's a very different component because in the end, when you're doing face-to-face learning, you're in the same location. It's very easy for us to psychologically work out with our students in terms of behavior, emotional, all those kinds of things. Pedagogical gap comes in a very challenging way. If you are now separated from your students, how are you now going to design online learning despite that gap, knowing that in the end students are on their own? They are on their own and they will you will not be there. So in a way, learner engagement should address the gap that we are seeing as of the moment. Okay, let's talk about it. More specifically, online distance learning activities. Ideally, there should be a combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning activities. What do we mean by that? This is a good comparison because what's happening right now is a lot of synchronous activity. Synchronous activity means we should go online together because the teacher is not prepared to curate materials or create learning materials. Teacher does what traditional teachers do in the classroom: deliver lecture, deliver discussion, right? Is it bad? Not necessarily. But right now, we need to consider that a lot of students, while they can be online, they might have problem with bandwidth. They might have devices that they need to share with their siblings. Okay? Parents might not be there to help them also. Then, anong mangyayari sa mga bata na ang parents ay essential workers, right? A lot of schools right now are assuming that parents are inside their home for the quarantine. But just to plainly tell you, online distance learning or online learning at this point in time is not homeschooling. Let's be clear on that. It's not homeschooling. Kasi kung homeschooling lang yan, wag na lang sila mag-enroll sa school natin. Mag-enroll na lang sila sa mga homeschool programs. Why am I emphasizing that? Because as teachers, we have professional standards. As teachers, we are trained to design learnings for students. Kung kaya din lang naman gawin ng mga parents ang ginagawa ng teachers, wag na silang mag-enroll sa school, right? That's a major difference right now because every teacher or some teachers are just dumping materials at home expecting that parents will help their kids. No, that is not the primary job of the parents right now. The primary job of the parents right now is to ensure that their kids are safe, secured, and ready to learn. The learning process itself, the teaching, it's still a responsibility of the teacher. So how do we do that? Right? How do we do that? Let's define learning activities that we can use right now: synchronous and asynchronous. Synchronous means let's go online, let's meet at the same time. We may be far from each other, But thank God for Zoom, thank God for FaceTime, for Google Meet, for WebEx, for Microsoft Teams, all of those kinds of things. Let's set a schedule, let's go online together. What's the biggest challenge here? This is prone to technical failure, right? I can imagine right now there's a big possibility that I will be cut off because internet right now in my location has been very very challenging. May schedule sila hapon wala ng internet or mahina na, right? Imagine those kinds of considerations. So if my teacher would put up synchronous activity in the afternoon, who gets left behind? Me. Is it my choice? No. Will teacher take it against me? I don't know. Sana hindi. But if teacher's gonna deliver a very crucial learning activity synchronously, I hope teacher has another option for me to catch up because it's not my choice to have a slow internet connection, right? So there. Now, asynchronous activities. Asynchronous activities means I as a teacher will design learning activities that students can do on their own. Self-paced learning. I can put up in our learning platform scheduled activities that they can do on their own. I will make it clear that they need to practice flexibility and self-regulation to make sure that they do my expectations at the end of the week or the module. This is less prone to technical issues, but this will challenge the teacher to be more flexible also and to be more, to have a more frequent way of feedback giving because the teacher is not there. So the teacher will have to use different platforms to give feedback. All right. Now, that's just a very general description. When do we need to use this? For me, synchronous activities should be used to check in with students, to ask how they are, what's their problem, what's their challenges. Use it to answer important questions, questions that are hard to answer on a discussion board. Clarify their misconceptions, build support. It's good to schedule an online check-in individually with a student or as a class just to learn how they are, right? But what if I want to deliver a lecture? If that lecture or discussion is something that they can watch on YouTube or they can read about, wag na, right? Sayang sa bandwidth, sayang sa effort mo. Kung wala ka rin lang sasabihin na bago sa mapapanood nila sa YouTube, baka wag na. Just schedule the video conference right after they read the source material so that you can clarify misconceptions. So that students will also be ready with their questions when they go in line. However, I also suggest to use synchronous activities or video conferences for structured brainstorming. Like for example, in Zoom or in some apps, you can create smaller groups among students where they can work together as a group. So structured brainstorming, or my favorite is to listening or welcoming a guest speaker, right? If for example, I'm talking about climate change, I know a person from NASA, I will use video conference for my students to connect to the expert from NASA, 'di ba? Those are the worthwhile activities to use video conferences. And if the video conference is very, very important, always make sure that you record the conference. But when you record the conference, always refer to privacy law, to privacy protocol, because student faces will be out there. What you can do is to ask the students to remove their video camera because what you want to record is the input of the guest speaker or your input. Another thing, if you're doing live conferences, make sure that you have protocols for behavior management. Like for example, for now, if I'm the one speaking, I thank Joseph for muting everyone. But if you're just the teacher in that online conference, it will be very, very hard. So make sure that you give students ahead of time your own video conference protocol. If they need something, ask them already to bring earlier. Um, Giving, like in the classroom, when you give instructions while you're discussing, it breaks the momentum of learning. It breaks the experience. All right. This is something that I want to put it up there. This is something that I found from fellow educators on the internet. Look at their suggestion. For grades K to 5, the ideal video learning instruction should just be 5 to 15 minutes. Because let's be honest, in the classroom, we as teachers, we've learned the sustained attention span of students is much lesser than we expect them to practice. For example, you have a 40-minute class or block schedule. In reality, the only time that students are paying attention to you will just be 20 minutes. It may just be 15 minutes that they're fully engaged with you. The rest will be used for, I don't know, classroom management, for other kinds of interaction. But in the end, what I want to show here is it is okay to have a lesser time for online instruction. What you can do is to give asynchronous activities or offline activities after your online discussion. It's not always good to spend an hour. Can you imagine, isang subject ka lang nun, isang oras ka nang nag-online lecture. Paano pa kaya pag dinagdag pa yung mga ibang subjects sa schedule? Think of screen time for kids, screen time for your students. If there are 5 subjects in one day, everyone decided to go online. Can you imagine the sense of being overwhelmed and being exhausted into sa mga bata? Pero as adults, we complain of a whole day Zoom meeting schedule. Imagine the students, right? So there, if we don't want a whole day schedule as adults, I'm pretty sure our students will not learn from those kinds of activities also. Okay? Now, another thing, asynchronous activities. Very much self-paced approach. And what is very, very important is learner agency. We will talk about learner agency later, but what I want to advise to everyone is that always think of the context of the student. When you create asynchronous activities or online or offline activities that they can do on their own, think of the developmental appropriateness of the learning materials and the activities for students. Case in point, senior high school or high school students can master a sense of learner agency. Hopefully they are very, very mature enough to really direct themselves. However, when you're teaching kinder, grade 1, grade 3, grade 4 students, learner agency or the sense of maturity, in reality is lesser, and they may need parental guidance and assistance. Let me clarify this. I'm pushing for the idea of parental guidance, not parental intervention to teach. No, there's a major difference. Parental guidance or role could be as simple as logging into your email, downloading the worksheet for your kids, or opening CISO for your kid. It's not teaching the material for your kid. The teaching of material for the kid should still be a responsibility of the teacher. So, what does the teacher need to do to ensure that we don't dump the responsibility to parents? Think about the nature and depth of content, time needed to complete it. Learning goals and expectations should be clear. Clear and hard work for instructions and activities. This is very, very important. The big idea is your online learning platform, your worksheets, all of the things that you're using, and distance learning becomes an extension of your teaching presence. Big idea of online distance learning. Every resources and tool that you use becomes an extension of you as a teacher. So that even if students are on their own, they know they can hear teacher's voice in those learning materials. All right? That's why it's very, very important to use clear and hard verb for instructions, concise instructions. So start your direction, start your activities with verbs. Like, for example, read the article on, listen to the podcast, play the Kahoot quiz, create a poster. Start with those very, very hard verbs. I've learned from my principal the idea of, or the alien metaphor. What's the best way to check if people would understand, if your students would understand your instructions or your document or material? Imagine an alien. If the alien reads, if the alien reads your work, maintindihan ba niya? Pag hindi niya maintindihan, ibig sabihin hindi yan maintindihan ng mga bata. That's the alien analogy. Okay? Make sure that it's easy to be understood by everyone. And of course, learner support. Online distance learning says that there should be learner support for questions and clarification. It's not as simple as dumping everything. No. What kind of learner support will you give students when they have questions? Do you have scheduled check-in? Do you share your email to them? Are they free to email you? What is the schedule of your learner support? Sana wag kang 24/7 kasi mauubos yung time mo. Wala nang boundary, right? Give them a sense of routine to ask their questions also to you. Examples of asynchronous learning activities: discussion forums or threads, video responses, discussion boards, recorded presentations or online readings, collaborative suites, self check assessments and quizzes, or even listening to podcasts. In short, all of these learning activities and the tech tools beside them are recommendations of asynchronous learning activities that students can do on their own. Okay? Hindi kailangan mag-video conference lagi. Pwedeng mag-push ng discussion through a discussion forum. You can ask them to collaborate or do online readings or watch video tutorials in Khan Academy, or read online articles in Newsella, or answer formative assessment or quizzes using Quizlet or Kahoot. So a lot of these things could be used by the students without necessarily going online. Um, I think I was able to mention some of the tips already. Can I just emphasize on number one? Keep learning activities simple. Less is more. Personally, for one module for 1 week, I only use three learning materials and a lot of activities connected with them. And then I spread them for 1 week. Okay. For me, I follow a one module 1 week or one module 2 weeks, depending on the length. But I lessen learning activities. I keep it straight. I keep it simple, direct to the point. That's the thing that you can do also. Okay. We talked about learner agency a while ago and wayfinding. This is just very simple to understand. Online learners, our students should be able to make choices, to make actions, and see the result of their own actions. In short, sana yung mga online distance learning course natin, not too rigid. We give student multiple pathways. We give student decisions. Baka yung learning material mo lang reading an article. Why not give them option to read, watch the videos similar to it, or play a game? In short, you can do individual, personalized learning or differentiated approach to instruction. When you do that, you're giving the students a sense of independence and learner agency. Big ideas of learner agency: choice, voice, ownership. Students should have a choice when learning online. What are your learning materials? Do they need to go through them? Or can you give them a choice of which learning materials they can use? Voice. Do you let your students share their learnings or demonstrate their learning through giving them the option to choose how would they do it? O lagi ka na lang bang essay? Do you give them time to answer in video responses or create movies? There's a lot of online tools right now, and depending on your assessment, maybe you can open it up more so that students will be able to demonstrate their learning uh, based on their own choice. When you give choice and voice, you're letting the students own their learning. There's a sense of me making decision and seeing that my decision will have consequences. When they realize that, they will surely make it a point to study well and to learn better, because the decision is not the decision, it's not something made by the teacher, but it's something that they have made for themselves. Of course, choice, voice, and ownership will have different levels among the K to 12 years. Huwag naman natin expect na yung sense of ownership kasing taas ng senior high school ang kinder. No. Always think of the context. Context ang importante. Wayfinding. What does wayfinding means? Na-imagine niyo si si Moana, yung culture, the Pacific Islanders culture of finding their way in the big Pacific Ocean without really needing a tool. That's wayfinding, right? Their only tools are the signs around them, the stars, the wind, the birds. That's the skill of the Samoan, of the basis for for Moana movie, right? Let's use that metaphor in online learning. In online learning, things could be tricky. For first time online learners, minsan nawawala sila sa learning environment. They don't know where to go. They don't know how to organize their thoughts. They don't know how to organize their learning materials. They don't follow the flow of learning activities. So it's very important that we use learning management platforms that are easy to follow, or tech tools that are, madaling aralin ng mga bata. But at the same time, we need to teach the students how to navigate learning online. It's called wayfinding and online distance learning. So how do we build agency and wayfinding skills? I have a few suggestions. In terms of learner agency, you could try student-led video conferences. Instead of teacher talking, why not assign some discussions that will be led by students? Like in a group, for example, in the classroom, I don't know if you practice lit circle or discussion groups. You could do that. When you do that, you are now giving the power to the students to proceed with their own discussions, and you as a teacher becomes a facilitator. Okay. Another thing connected with that is, if you cannot go online, why not create discussion forums that will push students to contribute in learning? I've been studying in UP Open University, and our mode of learning is actually online distance learning. I've never been to UP while I was learning. The only time that I went to UP was to uh, take my comprehensive exams. And I did not even go to UP headquarters in Los Baños. It's in UP Diliman because it's the closest to me. Everything else were done online. True to its nature, online distance learning should allow discussion forums. Ang ginagawa ng mga ibang open universities, they grade discussion forums, the participation. They require students to post an answer to a mother question and to reply to at least two of their classmates. All right? So, in a way, you're pushing for learning to happen. You're building that sense of communal building of knowledge for students. Wayfinding. Use the learning goals as your checklist. Very, very important. Make your learning goals visible. When students log in for module number one, they should know what the learning goals of module number one is. And then let your students use the learning goals as their checklist. This is very, very important, especially when you're teaching younger students. The learning goals becomes a checklist for the parents at home. They don't necessarily need to teach the kids, but they can check whether their kids or their children were able to achieve the learning goal. So, in short, parenting support also could come in giving them checklists on what kids would do. Another thing, Minimize clicks. Why do we say minimize clicks? The more the more browser you let your students open in their screen, the more distractions will come up. Tell your students, tell your parents that they should remind their kids to not open social media or to block social media from 7:30 to 4 p.m. kasi mag-aaral sila. If they can do that, that would be good. But the big idea is if you have a platform where students can access everything, use that feature. The less external links, the better. Okay? Less is more. Lesser learning activities can give more impact. I'm gonna share to you the idea of MAMI. MAMI. What does MAMI mean? Minimal activities, maximum impact. Okay? As adults, we want MAMI. Let's use MAMI for our students also. Minimal activities, maximum impact. Less is more. Okay? Chunk lesson for better learning. That's why it's important that for me, online distance learning should be presented in modular way. Hindi pwedeng lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, lesson 4. Magulo yon. What I suggest is you categorize all your lessons, put the similar themes, topics, and skills together. Then chunk them. Chunking of lessons online is better to avoid overloading the students in online learning or in technology based approach, we have that idea of fear of uh, multimedia cognitive overload. What does that mean? The more learning resources or online multimedia materials that you use, the more it leads to brain overload. And that principle is not just used in education. It's used in advertisement. It's used in graphics design. The more things happening in the advertisement or the graphics, the lesser is the focus of the one seeing it. It's the same in education. The more things that you want to put out there, the more the students cannot focus, the lesser the chance of better learning. So, chunk lessons for better learning. Chunking, cognitive approach to learning says chunking is very, very important, whether online, offline, face to face. Okay? So, I think that's it for now. Sorry for overloading you. Sorry for overloading everyone. But I'm gonna pause for now. Joseph, can we open for Q&A for everyone to share their thoughts also? I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen also.